This is the Sundering of Ways, first book of the Avalloneth. Chapter 2. The Song of the Three Daughters. Branmith began to speak, and as his voice rose and fell with the fire's rhythm, the night seemed to lean closer, listening.
The birth of the three daughters, as preserved among the houses of men. Before the counting of years, before fire was named or wind was taught its path, there were the Aethar, and above them the father whose name is not spoken lightly. And the Aethar looked into the vast silence and desired to make a dwelling place for life. So they spoke. At their speaking the elements stirred, waking from long sleep. Stone answered stone, dust gathered to dust, and the sands of the deep drew together like drifting thoughts made whole. At the call of the Aethar, the scattered things came, and before them lay a great and formless gathering, neither void nor world, but the promise of one. Then the Aethar stood together and prayed. They did not command, they did not shape with hands, but they bent their wills in unity, and their prayer passed into the gathering as a breath into still lungs. And at their prayer, the spirit of the world came, and she entered the gathering form, and the stones, both small and great, shuddered, for she was alive. Yet she had no heart. And so the Aethar labored again, pressing the world inward, folding stone upon stone, weight upon weight, until at her center fire was born, not flame, but living firestone, beating and flowing, a molten heart. From it ran rivers unseen, coursing through her hidden veins, giving warmth, motion, and strength. Thus the world was bound together, and she endured. Then the Aethar loosed the waters. They called the deep from above and from beneath, and the waters came in abundance, filling the low places, carving the high, cooling the fire where it touched stone. Seas were laid upon her like a cloak, and rivers traced her surface like silver threads. Thus Calith was born. And Calith drank deeply, and her voice grew steady. After this, the Aethar turned to life. They began with the smallest, for so all great things must rise. From damp and dust they shaped the creeping and the winged, the many-legged and the unseen. Upon these they set the next, and upon those the next again, fashioning a living mountain rising to a single peak, stone upon stone, each bearing the weight of the next. Beasts were given breath, and the forests filled with motion and sound, until the world stood crowned in living abundance. And Calith rejoiced for the life that was in her. Then Calith herself prayed. She lifted her voice, not in words but in longing, and her prayer passed beyond the Aethar to the Father above, whose sight is wider than worlds. And the Father heard her, and the Aethar heard the Father. After this, the Aethar departed for a time. They left Calith to her turning and her seasons. When at last the Aethar returned, they found that Calith was no longer as they had left her, for upon her lands walked men. How mankind came, the Aethar did not say, but Calith welcomed them, and in their waking thoughts and fragile years, a new age began. It is also taught that Calith is not alone. For in that first making, 3 worlds were shaped, sisters born of one labor and one prayer, daughters of the same Father. 2 are named alike, Calta, a paradise unmarred and gentle, and Calith, upon which our feet now stand, where life is hard won and dearly held. Of the third sister, Arun, little is spoken. She is named without song and not remembered. Some say she was set apart from the beginning, others that she was shaped for a purpose not yet revealed. Of her lands, her peoples, or her fate, the chronicles are silent, but all agree on this, that the three were made together, and that their stories are bound, whether known or unknown. And thus the ages of Caliph were set in motion, and the long tale of men began beneath the watching heavens.
Ranlith's voice faded, and for a moment he only watched the fire, as though the ending of the tale were not truly an ending at all. Then he began to sing, softly at first, in a melody older than the words, as if the song itself remembered what the telling could not hold, and each time the refrain came, low and familiar, a few of the men took it up with him.
Before the wind had learned to roam, before the stone had waked, the Aether spoke into the dark and called the world to wait. They gathered dust and broken light, they drew the scattered near, and bent their voices into form till earth could breathe and hear. Three were born of prayer and flame, three beneath the sky, daughters shaped of fire and stone, who woke and learned and sighed. They pressed the world till fire woke a heart of molten song, and through her veins the living heat ran bright and deep and strong. They loosed the waters on her skin, they carved the hill and plain, till river, sea and falling rain had taught her joy and pain. Three were born of prayer and flame, three beneath the sky, daughters shaped of fire and stone, who woke and learned and sighed. Small lives stirred in dust and damp, then wing and claw and breath, from creeping things to crown of beast, from birth and growth to death. And life was raised like mountain high, stone set on living stone, till earth stood clothed in moving song, and knew she was not lone. Then Caut awoke in gentle light, a garden fair and wide, and Caliph stirred with beating heart, and strength she bore with pride. But Arun turned her face away, her paths were set apart, for some are shaped for silent ways, and truths too deep to chart. Three were born of prayer and flame, three the Father knew. Two are sung in mortal halls, one fades from mortal view. The Aether bowed and withdrew their hands, the world was left to turn, and earth herself sent up a prayer for lives yet to be born. When next they came, the children walked beneath the open sky, and men awoke to borrowed breath and time that hastens by. Three were born of prayer and flame, three the ages bind, past paths once one now turned aside in song and soil and mine. Remember well, remember true, what once the world began. For daughters born of shaping fire still shape the fate of man.
When Branmith's voice fell silent, the night did not retreat. Indeed, it seemed to Havjörn that the silence that followed was not empty. Havjörn sat very still. He had heard the tale before, every child of the valley had, but never like this. Never from the mouth of a druid who had walked the old roads and seen the places where the world still bore the marks of its making. The words had not remained words. They had taken root. He could see it still, stone folding into itself, Calith's fire heart beating at the centre of the world, the slow, patient rising of life like a mountain built by unseen hands. When Branmith sang, the song had gone further still. It had pressed behind Havjörn's eyes until he felt as though he was standing within the making, watching Calith awaken beneath him. His chest ached with it, not fear, not joy exactly, but something close to longing. Around the fire, no one spoke. Men who minutes before had shouted and laughed now stared into the flames or bowed their heads. Even those who had heard the tale many times before seemed reluctant to disturb the quiet that had settled over them. It felt, to Havjörn, like reverence, not demanded but earned. Arnoran felt none of it. He had listened at first, out of courtesy more than interest, but his attention soon drifted. The words were familiar, too familiar. He had grown up with them, heard them recited in the druid longhouse at Dorvanion, sung at festivals, quoted by elders whenever the valley faced uncertainty. They had long since lost their sharpness. His thoughts wandered instead to the city. He imagined Dorvanion's council hall filled to its beams, the gathered voices rising and falling in argument. He imagined standing there, not at the edge as he had always done, but nearer the centre, where words carried weight. He thought of the men whose names were known beyond their farms or trades, whose opinions gathered others like sparks finding dry grass. And, unbidden, he thought of Druvana, of her dark eyes and quick smile, of the way she listened when he spoke, as though his thoughts mattered. He counted the hours until the watch would end, until the next shift arrived to release him from the week's duty. When at last the silence stretched too long for comfort, Arnoran shifted.
"Well," he said lightly, "if the world was spoken into being, it seems a shame it's fallen so quiet since."
A few men glanced up, startled. One or two chuckled uncertainly. Branmith did not. He looked at Arnoran steadily, and in his gaze there was no anger, only weariness.
"You take it for a tale,"
the druid said. Arnoran shrugged.
"For a beautiful one, yes, but a tale all the same. There's no proof any of it happened as sung. For all we know, the world has always been here."
The quiet that followed was sharper than before. Havjörn turned on him, heat rising to his face.
"That's not..."
Branmith lifted a hand, forestalling him.
"Proof,"
Branmith repeated, tasting the word.
"is a small thing to build a world upon."
"And stories are not?"
Arnoran asked evenly now.
"You speak as if memory alone makes truth."
"Memory,"
Branmith said,
"is where truth begins."
Havjörn felt the words settle somewhere deep, though he could not yet have said why. The druid rose slowly, leaning on his staff.
"Enough for tonight. Stories shape men, and I have shaped enough."
Disappointment flickered through Havjörn, but before he could speak, Branmith added,
"Tomorrow the road is long. There will be time then."
"To Dorvanion?"
Havjörn asked. Havjörn's heart leapt.
I live north of the city and will be traveling that way. If I may walk with you?
You may.
Branmith said, almost at once.
The chronicles were not made to be hoarded.
Arnoran watched the exchange, unreadable. Not long after, the fortress settled into sleep. Havjörn dreamed of darkness. He stood on open ground beneath a sky without stars, his breath loud in his ears. Shapes moved around him, tall, indistinct, more shadow than flesh. He raised his sword, but the blade felt heavy, slow to answer his will. When he struck, the shapes did not fall, they pressed closer. He ran. The ground fell away beneath his feet, and suddenly he stood at the edge of a great river, its waters black and swift. There was no crossing. When he turned back, the shapes were upon him. Hands seized him, dragged him down, and the water closed over his head. He fought for breath that would not come. Havjörn woke with a gasp, his heart hammering, his skin cold with sweat. The sky beyond the shutter was pale with approaching dawn. For a long while he lay still, listening to his breathing, certain the river's pull still tugged at him. But as he began to rise and prepare for the day, the dream faded into a simple nightmare and then was forgotten. Arnoran dreamed of voices. He stood in the council hall at Dorvanion, its great beams arching overhead, the floor crowded with the people of the valley. All eyes were on him. He spoke, and they listened. His words gathered them, shaped them, carried them where he willed. Then suddenly, they were gone. The benches stood empty. The echoes of his voice died against the walls. From the shadows at the far end of the hall, something moved. A snake slithered across the floor, its scales dark and gleaming. It rose before him, higher than a man, its eyes fixed on his own. Arnoran knelt, though he did not know why, his pulse thundering in his ears. The snake did not strike, it only watched. When Arnoran woke, the image lingered, sharp and unwelcome. He sat up, frowning, and shook his head as though to dislodge it. Dreams were only dreams. Still, as the light of morning crept into the fortress, he found himself eager to leave Harnhold behind, and uneasy at the thought of what may be waiting beyond the southern pass. This concludes Chapter 2 of the Sundering of Ways, first book of the Avalloneth.